I want you to picture something for me. You are driving your car. It is a busy Tuesday, maybe you're running a bit late, and you come up to a massive four-way intersection. But as you get closer, you realize something is wrong. The traffic lights are completely dark.
No red, no green.
Nothing, no yellow, just dead. And there is no police officer in the middle waving people through. It is just, well, it's anarchy.
That is the definition of a high-stress situation right there.
Right. You have cars creeping forward inch by inch. You are trying to make eye contact with the guy in the SUV across from you, wondering if he's going to stop or just gun it. You are relying entirely on the hope that everyone else is paying attention and following the unwritten rules.
It is amazing how quickly our sense of safety just evaporates when you remove that external authority, the traffic light. Suddenly you have to trust total strangers with your life.
Exactly. And I think most of us assume that this kind of Wild West scenario only happens on the ground when the power goes out. But what if I told you that in the sky where the stakes are infinitely higher, this is standard operating procedure for thousands of airports every single day?
It sounds terrifying when you put it that way, but you are absolutely right. We're talking about non-towered airports.
Today, we are doing a deep dive into a specific event that shows exactly what happens when that trust between strangers breaks down. We are unpacking the tragedy of United Express Flight 5925. And this is not a story about an engine exploding or a wing falling off.
No, not at all.
This is a story about a few spoken words that went missing and the devastating consequences of assuming the coast is clear.
This is a really heavy case. It happened back on November 19, 1996 at Quincy Municipal Airport in Illinois. And you hit the nail on the head earlier. This was not a mechanical failure in the traditional sense. It was a failure of communication, timing, and human psychology.
So, let's set the stage. When I think of commercial flying, I am picturing O'Hare or JFK. Massive control towers, guys in headsets tracking blips on a radar screen, telling pilots exactly what to do down to the second. But Quincy is not that, is it?
Not even close. Quincy Municipal is what we call a non-towered field. And just to give you some context, the vast majority of airports in the United States do not have a control tower. It is just not economically feasible to staff every small airstrip with air traffic controllers 24/7.
So if there's no controller who is directing traffic, if I'm a pilot flying a plane full of passengers into Quincy who gives me permission to land.
Nobody gives you permission. You give yourself permission.
Really?
Yeah, it is a system called see and avoid. Essentially, the pilots are completely responsible for coordinating with each other. They use a common traffic advisory frequency, or CTAF.
CTAF. Okay,
Yeah.
so is that like a conference call?
Think of it more like a chaotic group chat, or maybe a CB radio channel for everyone within a 10-mile radius of the airport. You hop on the frequency and you announce your intentions. You say, I am 10 miles out, or I am turning left, I am landing. You are constantly broadcasting your position so that every other pilot builds a mental map of where you are.
That seems like it requires a massive amount of trust. You are trusting that everyone else is on the right frequency, that they are speaking clearly, and that they are actually looking out the window.
It absolutely does.
Ah,
And the thing is, 99.9% of the time, it works perfectly. Pilots are professionals. But the system has a single point of failure. It relies entirely on active listening and accurate perception.
right.
If you miss a radio call or if you misinterpret silence, the safety net completely disappears.
Which brings us to that cold November afternoon in 1996. Who are the players on the board here? Because it was not just one plane involved.
All right, we have a cast of 3 aircraft. The main character, so to speak, is United Express Flight 5925. This is a Beechcraft 1900C. It is a twin-engine turboprop airliner, just a solid, reliable workhorse for regional flights.
And who is flying it?
In the cockpit, we have Captain Kate Gatchie and First Officer Darren McCombs. They are coming from Burlington, Iowa, bringing 10 passengers into Quincy. They are the ones in the air, approaching the airport to land.
Okay, so they are coming down. Who is on the ground waiting?
This is where the geometry of the situation gets really critical. On the ground, preparing to take off, we have 2 smaller private planes. The first one is a Beechcraft King Air. It is a high-performance private aircraft flown by a 63-year-old pilot named Neil Reinwald. He has a flight instructor on board, Laura Winkleman Brooks, but she is just a passenger for this particular leg of the trip.
And then there's a third plane, right? A smaller one.
Yes, a Piper Cherokee. It is a small, single-engine private plane. It is taxiing out behind the King Air. Now, usually 3 planes at an airport is no big deal at all, but Quincy has a specific layout that turns this into a puzzle. The runways intersect.
Like a literal X on the ground.
Exactly like an X. Imagine it in your head. The United Express flight is coming in to land on runway 13. Meanwhile, the King Air and the Piper Cherokee are taxiing out to take off on runway 4. Those two runways cross each other right in the middle.
I see the problem. If the United plane lands at the exact same time the King Air takes off, they're going to meet right in the middle of that X.
Precisely. And in aviation, two objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time without catastrophic results. The rules of the road say that landing traffic generally has the right of way, but the ultimate rule is to never enter a runway unless you are absolutely sure it is clear.
So put us in the cockpit of the United Express. Captain Gatchi is coming in. She knows this is a non-towered airport. She knows there are planes on the ground. She's probably on high alert, right?
She is. She is doing everything completely by the book. As they get closer to landing, she is on that common traffic advisory frequency. She sees the planes on the ground, or at least knows they're in the vicinity, and she wants to confirm their intentions. She specifically asks about the King Air.
Because the King Air is the one at the front of the line to take off.
Right. She keys her mic and asks, effectively, King Air, are you holding short or are you taking off? She needs to know if they're going to wait for her to land and pass the intersection.
And what does she hear back?
The first time she asks, it is just silence. No response.
That is unnerving. Silence is not a yes, and it is not a no. It is just a giant question mark.
Exactly. And when you are hurtling toward the ground at 130 knots, a question mark is incredibly dangerous. So she asks again. She is diligent. She gets on the radio a second time and asks the King Air to confirm they are holding short of the runway.
And this is the moment, right? This is where everything pivots.
This is the fatal second. She asks the question. And this time she gets an answer. But it is not from the person she thinks it is.
It's the third pilot, the guy in the little Piper Cherokee.
The pilot of the Piper Cherokee is sitting behind the King Air on the taxiway. He hears the United crew asking if traffic is holding. He decides to be helpful. He keys his mic to confirm that he is holding.
He is basically saying, don't worry about me, I'm stopping.
He says, Cherokee holding short. It is a completely standard call. But here is where technology and bad luck collide in the worst possible way. At the exact millisecond the Cherokee pilot starts speaking, a safety system in the United Express cockpit activates.
A safety system?
Yes, the Ground Proximity Warning System, or GPWS. Because the United plane is getting close to the ground for landing, the computer triggers an automatic altitude alert. It is a loud electronic tone or a voice call-out inside their cockpit.
So you have a voice on the radio and a loud beep in the cockpit happening at the exact same time.
We call it stepping on a transmission. The loud electronic alert in the cockpit drowned out the first word of the radio call. The Cherokee pilot said, Cherokee holding short. But the United pilots did not hear the word Cherokee. They just heard the tail end of the sentence.
They just heard holding short.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. I see where this is going. They had just asked the King Air a direct question.
Yes. They asked the King Air, are you holding? They heard a voice say, holding short. Their brains filled in the gap. This is a textbook example of confirmation bias.
Yeah.
They expected the King Air to answer, so when they heard a partial confirmation, they assumed it was the King Air.
They hear what they want to hear. The King Air is stopping, the runway is mine.
That is the exact conclusion they drew. They believed the intersection was perfectly clear. But in reality, the King Air, the plane that was actually the threat, had never said a single word.
Why not? Why was the King Air totally silent?
The investigation suggests the King Air pilot simply was not paying attention. He may not have heard the query, or he might have been distracted by something in the cockpit. He never announced his takeoff clearly on the radio, and he never responded to the United crew.
So he thinks the coast is clear too. He pushes the throttle forward.
He begins his takeoff roll on runway 4. At the same moment, the United Express touches down on runway 13.
It is like a horror movie where you were screaming at the screen, you have two planes rushing toward the same point, and neither pilot realizes the other is there until it is too late.
The United pilots spot the King Air at the very last second. We know this because investigators found heavy skid marks on the runway. They slammed on the brakes. They tried to steer the plane away. But you cannot stop a 16,000-pound aircraft instantly. Physics is just unforgiving.
They collide right at the intersection.
They do. The wings impact, the engine smash together. The King Air is effectively destroyed by the sheer force. The United Express plane skids off the runway, slides across the grass for about 110 feet, and finally comes to a stop.
Now, this is the part of the story that I found the most haunting when I was reading the reports. Because usually when we talk about plane crashes, the impact is the end of the story. but that was not the case here at all.
No, and this is the detail that keeps safety investigators up at night. The collision was violent, yes, but according to the NTSB, the impact itself was survivable for everyone on board the United Express flight.
Wait, everyone on the commercial plane survived the initial crash?
All 12 people. 2 pilots and the 10 passengers.
Mhm.
The fuselage remained largely intact. They were shaken up, they were terrified, but they were alive, they were conscious.
So why did we lose them?
Because they could not get out.
Yeah.
The collision warped the frame of the aircraft. The United Express plane, the Beechcraft 1900, has a main cabin door that doubles as stairs. It is called an air stair door, and it operates with a cable system.
I have seen those. They kind of fold down and out.
Right. The impact bent the fuselage just enough that the door jammed completely shut.
They were trapped inside a metal tube.
Trapped. And tragically, the collision had ruptured the fuel tanks. A fire broke out almost immediately on the outside of the plane.
I cannot even imagine the panic. You survive the crash, you can look out the window and see the grass, see the sky, but the door will not budge.
And people were trying to help. This is the truly heartbreaking part.
Yeah.
The pilot of the Piper Cherokee, the guy who made that stepped-on radio call, he saw the whole thing happen right in front of him. He and other pilots at the airport rushed over to the wreckage. They were outside, pulling on that door handle with everything they had.
But they could not force it open.
No, the damage was too severe. And Quincy Municipal Airport, like many small airports, did not have a dedicated fire rescue team sitting in a truck with the engine running right next to the runway. But the time the local volunteer fire department arrived, the fire had spread completely.
So the smoke got them.
That is right. The cause of death for all 12 people on the United Express and the 2 pilots in the King Air who died in the collision was smoke inhalation. It was a survivable crash that turned into a fatal tragedy because of a jammed door and a lack of immediate rescue equipment.
That is absolutely devastating. It changes the entire narrative for me. It is not just pilot error. It is a systemic failure. The radio failed, the door failed, the rescue response failed.
It is what we call the Swiss cheese model of accident causation. You have these layers of defense pilot vigilance, radio procedures, aircraft design, emergency response. Usually if one layer has a hole in it, the next layer stops the accident. But in Quincy, the holes in every single layer lined up perfectly.
So when the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, finished their investigation, who did they blame? Did they blame the Cherokee pilot for speaking at the wrong time?
The fatal transmission that stepped on radio call was listed as a major contributing factor. It explains why the United crew is confused. But the NTSB placed the primary blame squarely on the shoulders of the King Air pilot.
Neil Reinwald, the one who never answered.
Correct. The official cause was a failure to monitor the common frequency and a failure to scan for traffic.
Scan for traffic, that sounds so basic. It is basically look both ways before you cross the street.
It is basic, and that is exactly why it is so damning. Even with the radio confusion, even with the technological glitch, even with the Cherokee pilot chiming in, all the King Air pilot had to do was turn his head to the left.
The United plane was not invisible. It was right there.
It was a clear day. Visibility was perfect. If the King Air pilot had just looked down runway 13 before you crossed the hold line, he would have seen a large twin-turboprop airliner bearing down on him.
So he was flying blind. He was relying entirely on what? Why would he not look?
Complacency. Distraction. We will never know exactly what was happening in that cockpit. But he violated the golden rule of non-towered airports. Trust no one. Verify everything. He likely assumed that because he did not hear anyone screaming at him on the radio, the runway was empty.
And on the flip side, the United crew assumed that because they heard a word that sounded like holding, the runway was safe.
That is the psychological trap. We call it expectation bias. When you are under a high workload like landing a plane, your brain craves simplicity. You want the answer to be yes. You are actively looking for information that confirms your plan. They needed the King Air to be holding short. They heard holding short. Their brains filtered out the ambiguity because the partial data matched their desire.
It is chilling because we do that in everyday life all the time. We hear what we want to hear. You read a text message and interpret the tone based on what you are feeling, not what is actually there.
Absolutely. In a boardroom or a relationship, that might lead to an argument or a lost deal. In aviation, it leads to 2 planes colliding on a runway. That is why the training for these airports changed so drastically after Quincy.
What changed? Did they start building towers everywhere?
No, that is still too expensive. But they changed the way pilots are trained to communicate. Now, there is a massive emphasis on specificity. You never, ever just say holding short.
You have to say who you are.
You have to say, Cherokee 5 Hotel Papa is holding short runway 4. And if you are the landing pilot and you hear a garbled message or a beep steps on the call sign, you do not assume. You ask again. You say, aircraft holding short, say call sign.
You treat ambiguity as a threat.
Ambiguity is the enemy. If there's even a 1% doubt about who is talking, you assume the runway is blocked until proven otherwise. That is the lesson written in blood here.
What about the door? Did they fix the plane so that does not happen again?
There were recommendations regarding door maintenance and emergency exit training. The industry also took a hard look at rescue capabilities at small airports. But, you can engineer a stronger door and you can upgrade the radios, but the core lesson keeps coming back to human performance.
The human element.
Exactly. You cannot engineer a solution for a pilot who simply decides not to look out the window. That is a behavioral issue, not a mechanical one.
It is really a story about the intersection of high-tech and low-tech, isn't it? You have these advanced turboprops. You have GPWS computers shouting warnings. But the failure point was the human eye and the human ear.
We love our technology. We rely on it completely. The United pilots relied on the radio, a piece of technology, to tell them it was safe. But the NTSB report was scathing about the fact that the Mark I eyeball, just looking outside, would have saved everyone.
That is a profound takeaway for all of us, honestly. We are not piloting planes into rural Illinois, but we navigate these intersections all the time in our own lives.
We do. Think about managing a project. If you assume you know what your team is doing because you sent an email, but you never actually verified it, or if you assume a client is happy because they have not complained, but you have not actually asked them, you are creating that exact same danger zone.
Cherokee holding short versus holding short. The difference between life and death was literally one word lost in a beep.
It forces you to ask yourself, are we verifying reality or are we just seeing what we expect to see?
This has been an incredible deep dive. We have covered the mechanics, the psychology, and the tragedy of the aftermath. It is a story that really sticks with you long after you hear it.
It certainly does. It is a case study that is taught to almost every single pilot during their training, but the principles apply to everyone.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on. We live in a world that is noisier than ever. Our phones are beeping, Slack is pinging, the news is shouting at us from every screen.
We're constantly being stepped on by digital noise.
Exactly. The pilots of Flight 5925 were betrayed by a digital alert that drowned out a human warning. But the ultimate failsafe was right there, a window. All they had to do was look up.
Just look up.
In an age of endless notifications and digital distractions, are we forgetting to just look up and see what is actually right in front of us? Are we assuming the coast is clear just because our phone did not tell us otherwise?
That is the big question. Sometimes the most advanced safety tool you have is your own attention.
A heavy but absolutely necessary lesson from United Express Flight 5925. Thanks for guiding us through the wreckage and the report today.
My pleasure. Stay safe out there.
And to you listening, thanks for diving deep with us. Stay skeptical, verify your sources, and for heaven's sake, look both ways. We will see you on the next one.